back to my channel. My name is Tiara, aka Bookworm Babe, and I know it has been a bit of a while since I've recorded a video, but I wanted to come on here today and do just a bit of like a talk, I guess you could say. I'm just kind of in one of those moods where I kind of just want to share some stuff that's been on my mind, and I think, you know, would probably, and at least I'm hoping, would be relevant to you guys as well. So one thing that I have been sort of thinking about a lot lately has been the concept of identity, as you've probably seen from the title of this video. And, you know, specifically for me, this is my Indo-Caribbean identity. I have found myself reflecting a lot on my experiences in my childhood and, you know, my like middle school, high school years, things like that, that really played a role in the way I looked at myself. And again, this, you know, relates back to my cultural identity. I was around people who didn't really like understand my identity. And this, you know, had to do with the fact that, you know, if you are not familiar with, you know, Indo-Caribbean people, or the fact that there are people of Indian descent in the Caribbean, then, you know, someone who looks like me, you might just think is South Asian from like India or Pakistan, Bangladesh, I don't know, something like that. But that was a big part of my childhood, was, you know, people always thought that I was Indian from India, and it was very frustrating. And I'm sure I know I've spoken about this before, but it never ceases to amaze me how many people have had similar experiences, and not necessarily, I mean, our situations and scenarios have obviously been different, but the experience of people not understanding your identity is very common, it seems, at least within the Indo-Caribbean community, and especially for those of us who have obviously grown up in different parts of the world. And for me, that's Canada. I think particularly what I was reflecting on was certain incidents throughout my school years that really stuck with me. And, you know, there were a lot when I was in elementary school, just cause, again, like, this is where, you know, everyone starts to get a little bit older. We're all like more conscious of each other, past just like, oh yeah, like, let's just play together and be friends. People become more conscious of one another and, you know, want to know, like, you know, what's your background? Where are you from? What language do you speak? What do your parents do? Do you live in a house or a building? Like, things like that. Those are the types of things I remember we would all be asking each other as we got older. And, you know, when the topic of background came up, it was so awkward for me because prior to talking about these things, I never really thought about identity or thought about where I was from and things in like a deeper context. I knew I was obviously Caribbean, my mom is Trinidadian, my dad is Guyanese, and, you know, that makes me who I am. And as much as I knew about the Caribbean, and this is coming from like a 7-year-old, you know, viewpoint of me at 7 years old, was, yeah, people from the Caribbean all look different. We have different backgrounds within our own background, and that's why we're like, our islands are so diverse. So that was basically roughly my understanding of it. We just come from like our home countries are very diverse, and people have different backgrounds. We come from different places, and we have different skin colors, all types of things like that. But yeah, like, I understood that there was a diversity, but as far as that diversity went, Caribbean was still Caribbean. At the end of the day, we were all still, you know, Caribbean. It didn't matter what descent you were. Being Trini was being Trini, and being Guyanese was being Guyanese. So that was the only way that I really saw things. I was Trini and Guyanese. I wasn't breaking it down by like Afro-Caribbean to Indo-Caribbean. I didn't even know the term Indo-Caribbean until probably a few years ago, maybe a little more than a few years ago. I think I was like 17, 18 the first time I saw the term Indo-Caribbean, I want to say, roughly around then. And that was, again, like the first time I had heard a term like that. Prior to that, the only word I had ever really heard, if we were specifically talking about, you know, Indo-Caribbeans, the only word I had heard people say was coolie. So I never really had any further like distinguishing word past that. But, you know, again, to like these moments of me telling my classmates where I was from, and then the immediate response being, where is that? Or, but you look Indian, you don't look Caribbean. Because Caribbean is oftentimes associated with Afro-Caribbean versus, you know, Indo-Caribbean. I was just in these awkward positions where I was like, I didn't know what to say. Like, I really didn't know what to say to that. Why did I look Indian? I don't know. I never thought of myself as looking Indian. I never thought of myself as looking or being anything other than what I was. And, you know, again, this is like a child's point of view. So yeah, you're not looking at this like, I wasn't looking at things at a very like critical standpoint, or even breaking it down in terms of, you know, different heritage and things like that. I was what I was, and that was what I knew to tell people. I didn't have any sort of further explanation about my ancestors and indenture and all that. I really, you know, I didn't have that knowledge at the time. And even if I did, I don't necessarily think it would have been received well either amongst, again, like 7 and 8 year olds. And then even when I got to middle school, if anything, by middle school, people are more vocal and that whole childhood innocence is kind of gone. So there's less filter and less politeness, we'll say, when people like approach you and speak to you about certain things. And I remember one incident where I was just like sitting in the field or whatever, like the school field with 2 of my friends who were East Asian. Their backgrounds were East Asian, and this other guy from my grade, I don't think he was in my class, I honestly can't remember, but he came up to us and he made like a comment about like, oh look, like, you know, a group of Asians hanging out together or something like that. It was just like, it was a kind of a dumb comment to begin with, and I responded by saying like, oh well, I'm not Asian. And he like got very kind of like aggressive. He was like, yes you are. And I said, no I'm not. He's like, yes you are. And I was like, no I'm not. At this point it's kind of like, okay, you are really trying to force your view on me at this point. And then he's like, so what are you? I said, I'm Caribbean, I'm Trinidadian and Guyanese. He's like, but you look Indian. And I was like, okay, like, and that was just where the conversation ended. Like, that was very much it. It was, and that incident really stuck with me. It was just one of those things where it was like this aggression, because the way he spoke was aggressively. He was like, yes you are, yes you are, you're Indian, you know, you're Indian. No I'm not, no I'm not, you know, like it was just a really back and forth basic yes you are, no you're not, yes you, like that. And yeah, like I said, like this incident stuck with me because it was like, it was really bothersome in a lot of ways. It was like, you know, you are misidentifying me, which is like, okay, things happen, you know, sometimes we assume that people are, you know, a certain background because they look a certain way, but then I corrected you and then you still had to like tweak, you know, the story to kind of fit your own box of what made sense. It's like, I just told you where I was from, but that didn't compute. It was like, okay, but you look Indian, so, and that was just where it was like, what I got from the interaction. And yeah, it really, and that one really bothered me. And even when I still think about it to this day, like it really bothers me because I just wish that I had handled it differently. But like I didn't have, again, like I wasn't in a place where like I had the knowledge of like my history and ancestors and was ready to just go on command and correct everybody. And again, even in like a middle school setting, would it have even computed? Would it have even, you know, would he have changed his like reaction to me? I'm not sure. Remember, there was another time I was in grade 9 and I was talking to a girl in my class, and same thing, she asked me where I was from, so here we go, we had to give the whole spiel again. Because she was like, oh, like, I know you're brown, but you don't look brown. And I was like, oh, well, I don't really know what brown is. I'm like, oh, last I checked, I was brown. But so I don't know, I was like, okay, I don't know where this is going, but I had told her I'm brown, but I'm from the Caribbean and I'm Trinidadian and Guyanese, and she was like, oh, so you're black. And I was like, no, like not quite. But she was like, oh, but you know, brown is like Indian, from India, or you know, places in South Asia. So if you're, and black, you know, is like Caribbean, so if you're Caribbean then you're black. And I was like, well, okay, this logic is completely flawed, but it was like another weird weird moment where it's like, okay, so if you're not like, if you're Caribbean, then you have to be black now. And it's like, but no, not really. And I remember her and I had kind of gone back and forth on it, because at this point, you know, being a little bit older, I was, you know, I did my best to kind of correct and be like, no, like that's not quite the case. But, you know, eventually it just kind of, like, the conversation just kind of shifted. But again, like, this was a moment that stuck with me. And I think the reflecting on these moments so heavily now is really comes from me realizing the way all these moments and all the, like, the tiny, I have, like, there's plenty of stories like this, but these are just some of the standout ones that I have. These moments affected the way I looked at myself. They affected the way I identified, the way I looked at my own, like, cultural identity. And for a long time, again, like, I think I've probably maybe spoken about this before, but for a very long time, I was not proud of being Indo-Caribbean, or even like just with the way I looked, because it was frustrating because I didn't look like what I was, or at least the way it would have more easily like registered with people. And I kind of wished that I was like Afro-Caribbean or something, because at least then if I said I was Caribbean, people would just say, okay. And like there would be no back and forth and questioning. I would have just, you know, fit the box of what people thought, oh, a Caribbean person is what a Caribbean person looks like. And that kind of all sort of affected the way I saw myself. I was like, ugh, why do I have to like look different? And like, why can I not just fit this, you know, this mold of what people think Caribbean people are? I just didn't like not fitting in a box. And like that was so wrong in so many ways, because you know, no one should ever feel like, you know, you want to fit in a box, nor should you ever be put in a box. But again, like these things affected just my overall perception of myself, and I hated having to talk about my cultural identity. I hated having to explain my background to anyone. I hated telling anyone where I was from, and I avoided it. Like I heavily tried to avoid these conversations by the time I was in middle school. And by high school, if I never had to talk about it ever again, like I was happy. But you know, I mean, you can't obviously avoid it, and these incidents still continue to happen. And it wasn't until I got like out of the whole bubble of school and things like that, took a year off after high school, and I was working, and then when I was in college, I met a lot of Caribbean people, and that was you know, a mix of Indo and Afro-Caribbean people. But it was so comforting and refreshing because people knew just off looking at me, you know, and this is like any Caribbean person just knew off looking at me that I was either Trinidadian or Guyanese. And then I was just like happy to be like, hey, you're right, well, I'm actually both, you know. Like it was so simple after that, and there's no need for explanation. Like there's literally no need for explanation after that, because I think one thing I found in my own experience is that Caribbean people are just so easy to just relate to with one another. Like just when two people know that like you're from the same island, or you're just from an island, there's like this instant connection that happens, and it's great. Like it's such a great feeling, and there's no need to feel like awkward or weird or things like that. Things that I felt when I was younger. I felt awkward and I felt weird, and I didn't feel like, you know, I was something like regular. Like and all of these things when I'm older now seem so crazy to me to even think. Like I really didn't feel like I was like regular, because I didn't come from a background that was more easily identified. Like I wasn't, you know, British or Australian or Jamaican or you know, something like that. Like things that people just knew right off the bat and never would ask you a question afterwards. So I'm not sure where exactly I was going with this video, other than to, I think, make the point of, through my reflections, and I think, you know, so many of us have gone through these similar reflections as well, whether it was younger on in your life, whether it's right now, whether it's when you're even older, depending on, you know, what age you are now. But I think these are things that we all go through, and I also think that it's very beneficial to know that other people have gone through it too. For the longest time, I felt like I was the only one going through these things, because I didn't really like witness any of my other classmates getting questioned or getting told like things the way I was getting told things, or being told that they looked a certain way, or that they looked, you know, or sounded or anything, something other than the background that they said they were. And those things again frustrated me, because it was like, why am I the one person who just always has to go through this and like have to answer a million questions, or kind of try to like prove that I was who I said I was. That's, I think, more so what it felt like. It felt like I had to prove that I was Indo-Caribbean, or that I was just Caribbean for that matter. But having connected with people and spoken about these things, it feels a lot better. I mean, obviously I'm not happy to hear people have gone through these things, but it feels good to know that other people have gone through them and that we're able to relate to one another. And it also feels really nice to know, you know, now that, you know, I'm 25 and I have gone through at least the initial stages of my reclamation and my I'm not really sure what to call it otherwise, but like my reclamation, where I'm just like, I've researched a ton, and you know, I read all the time, and I'm always trying to find ways, get to know my culture better, get to understand my family better, understand my past, and the past that doesn't even have me as a part of it, like just the past in general of like Indo-Caribbean people and Caribbean people as a whole. That I'm at a place now where had I been like put in these situations now at 25, I would have a completely different reaction. I'd have a completely different response, and I wouldn't shy away from it. I wouldn't feel like non-confident in explaining these things, or even if somebody was trying to kind of like enforce their views on me, or try to like push something, you know, at me to say like, oh well, you know, despite what you're saying, you still look blah blah blah. I would just have a different approach now, because I'm not in a place anymore where I don't have the right information to explain things, where I don't feel proud of my identity, where I don't feel proud of, you know, the way I look or the way I sound or the places that I come from, whether or not people are able to like understand that, or able to, I don't know, whether it makes sense for them or not. It's just like I'm unfazed by those things now, and it's a huge point for me, because like it's almost unbelievable for me to think that there was a time when like my culture was the last thing I ever wanted to talk about, and I was really ashamed of it. Like I wouldn't, not ashamed that I thought the culture was bad, but I was ashamed of it in the sense that I just never wanted to talk about it, because I just felt like I didn't belong to it, and I almost felt like because I didn't belong to it, I couldn't talk about it, and I couldn't embrace it, and I couldn't feel proud of it and take part and things like that. But the reality was like, you're always taking part, you're always, you know, you're always actively a part of your culture, even when you don't think you are. So yeah, I think I've spoken long enough, but my hope is just that if you are watching this and maybe you've related to some of these situations, or you have had, you know, your own journey with reclamation and your identity, and find yourself reflecting on the moments in your life that have made an impact on you, whether it was positive or negative, you know, you're not alone. And we all go through it, and I actually think that one of the best things we can do is have conversations about it and have our own personal reflections, because it helps us become more firmly rooted in who we are, and you know, we're able to validate our own identities. You know, we don't need, and this goes for anyone, Indo-Caribbean or not, but you don't need anyone to validate your identity. If you know who you are, then that's really all you'll need. And I can honestly attest to the fact that it takes time to get there. It really, really does. And you know, it's not easy. It's really not easy. So if you're on that journey, just know, like, I am completely in support of your entire reclamation process, and yeah, you are not alone. So that's it for me today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully I can do some more cultural talks in the next little while, so keep an eye out for those. Take care and stay safe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!